Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Leanna Davis. I am the Chief Programs Officer and Deputy Director at Wiki Education. We are a nonprofit that runs a series of programs connecting subject matter experts to Wikipedia and working on improving Wikipedia content. And while you're joining, please feel free to share in the chat who you are and where you're joining us from. And if you have a fun fact that you like about Wikipedia, feel free to add that as well. We are here today with a special edition of our speaker series to celebrate the 25th birthday of Wikipedia. We're actually one day early. The actual birthday is tomorrow, but it is 25 years of some incredible knowledge that has been shared around the world. And so I will start with a couple of quick housekeeping items. And then I will jump in with introductions of our panelists today. Um, so a few notes before we begin. If you have questions for our panelists during this talk, please feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom. The webinar chat can get quite busy and questions can get lost there, so we encourage you to use the question and answer box for that. And we will have some time at the end for questions that are coming in from the audience. I want to also do a quick introduction of Wiki Education. So our core two programs are our Wikipedia student program, which is where we support college and university faculty in the United States and Canada to run a Wikipedia assignment within their classroom. So encouraging their students to edit Wikipedia as part of the coursework. And you can learn more about that program at teach.wikiedu.org. I think my colleague Colleen will be putting the link into the chat there for everyone. And then we run a second program called our Wiki Scholars and Scientists program, where we run courses to support individuals who are interested in learning how to edit Wikipedia themselves. And you can see upcoming courses available at learn.wikiedu.org, which I believe Colleen will put a link to that in the chat as well. So I think I'm going to get us started now, and I will ask the panelists to each introduce themselves. And when you do, I would like you to also share a favorite Wikipedia tidbit. So this could be some sort of anecdote, it could be a discussion, it could be an article you particularly like, something that you want to celebrate about the last 25 years of Wikipedia. And Steve, you're up first on my screen, so I'm going to call on you first.
Stephen Mintz. I'm a professor of history at the University of Texas at Austin, and I can't choose a favorite article. Uh, what's remarkable about Wikipedia is that you can find anything. That's what makes the difference.
All right, thanks. Carwell, you're next on my screen.
My name's Carl Bjork James. I'm an associate professor at Vanderbilt University in anthropology. I think my favorite tidbit, may they're going to be linked, is on the one hand the edit template or the pop-up that you can put in the top of a page and that you see a lot less of now, called Globalize. But what it actually says is the examples and perspectives in this article may not represent a worldwide view of the subject. You may improve this article, and goes on from there. And so those kinds of tools that said, oh, we know you're writing from somewhere, but this is a global community that can improve something, is really important. And I don't think it quite would have been that thing, but perhaps my favorite contribution ever, was adding sections to the Hermitage, which is our local slave plantation, former home of Andrew Jackson, to treat it as a plantation that had a substantial enslaved population rather than to treat it primarily just as the home of Andrew and Rachel Jackson. And so that ability to just add on and give that additional perspective is just one of the most empowering aspects of Wikipedia.
Thanks, Carwell. Phoebe, you're next.
Thanks. I'm Phoebe Ayers. I'm a librarian in Cambridge, Mass, where I work at MIT Libraries. I support science and engineering there, and I've been a Wikipedian for a long time, as an editor, an author, researcher, and a member of our foundation governance. I like um, many things. One thing that I have liked for a very long time are the lists of list articles. So there are lists of things on Wikipedia, and then there are lists to combine those. And then there's this meta category that I'm particularly fond of.
That's one of my favorites as well, Phoebe. Thank you. And last but not least, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan McGrady. I'm a senior research fellow at the Initiative for Digital Public Infrastructure at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, although I live here in Brooklyn. Yeah, I've been a Wikipedian for quite some time, researching, teaching, worked with Wiki Education for a while, and these days also researching some other platforms. So the Wikipedia tidbit that I chose is the Wiki Project Dinosaurs Image Project. So it's hard to get photographs of dinosaurs to illustrate articles. And a lot of the scientific illustrations are copyrighted. And so the members of Wiki Project Dinosaurs have this whole system where they use scientific descriptions of dinosaurs to draw by hand. And a lot of them are really rudimentary because it's just a volunteer project. And what I love to see is you see some of these illustrations of dinosaurs. If you go into the history of that image, you can see like somebody's drawing skills getting better over the course of 10 years as they draw this obscure dinosaur based on scientific papers. And it's a very charming little volunteer bit of the project.
Ryan, I love that. I've been a Wikipedian for more than 15 years now, and I had no idea that existed, but I'm going to have to check it out now. I love that. All right, well, I'm going to dig into our questions here, and my first one is for Phoebe, but everyone should feel free to chime in with other thoughts as well. So, Phoebe, you started editing Wikipedia in 2003, when Wikipedia was only 2 years old. In its early days, what problems was Wikipedia trying to solve? And in the intervening quarter century, has it solved those problems, and which issues remain?
Yeah, thanks. 25 years. My goodness. First, thank you, Leanna and Colleen and the whole Wiki Education team for putting this on. Thank you for having us and to all of you for attending. I mean, one thing that's obviously changed is just the scale and size of Wikipedia. I went back and looked, and when I started editing, there were somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 articles on the English Wikipedia. For reference, today there's 7 million, a bit over 7 million. So there's simply a lot more Wikipedia. Um, but honestly, I think the mission and the goals have stayed pretty consistent and pretty much the same over that time period. So this, line, imagine a world in which every single human being can freely summon the share of all knowledge. We've sort of had that from the beginning, and it's stayed a through line. I think the tone of contribution has changed, like what it's like to be a contributor has changed a little bit. Early on, we were just trying to kind of get everything in there, document everything. There wasn't quite as much emphasis on sourcing outside things. But one thing there was is an early recognition and emphasis on, like Carwell, you were saying, that we need a global perspective in this project, and an emphasis on systemic bias. That was one of the very, very first kind of task force that was founded on Wikipedia. And that led to, for instance, many other editions of Wikipedia being founded in non-English languages very early on in the first couple of years. The other thing is in 2003, and I know some of you, I recognized a few names in the chat. I know a few of you were here then. Early on, it felt like much more of an experiment, like we were trying something out. I I was in graduate school for library science back then, and people had heard of Wikipedia, but they were skeptical, like maybe they hadn't used it. They were like, "Oh, you and your quirky hobby, that's nice." And today, I think there's much more of an knowledge when you're contributing that Wikipedia is an institution. It matters. People are going to read this thing. It's still a quirky hobby, of course, but we know that it's an important thing now. One thing that I wanted to read to you all just to kick us off is this essay or part of an essay, it's short. But a favorite thing of mine that was written about Wikipedia in maybe 2006 by a contributor named Catherine Monroe. And I think it's really relevant today. I quote this essay on my user page, and it goes in part, you start talking about the long term, about being one of the first large information sources on the web that's truly free. And you start talking about what will happen if this works, that because it's free, it's going to be the default resource for a whole lot of people. And you start to get a little bit awed by the responsibility to build it properly and keep it open and keep it sane. And most of all, to get the facts right, because this work is going to be a base on which many unforeseeable future projects will be built. End quote. So Catherine wrote that in 2006. And my feeling is now, today in 2026, with AI and LLMs, we're sort of in the era of the unforeseeable future projects, right? And it's very destabilizing. And we don't know how we're going to survive it as an encyclopedia, as a society. Um, but the sense that we have a responsibility to get it right, because many people are using it in all these unforeseen ways, that was true then. I think it's still true today.
Thanks, Phoebe. And I think we'll get into some of those questions around AI in the future a little bit later. But any thoughts that anyone wants to jump in here with, or should I move on?
I will say before we move on, if I may,
Of course.
I think probably our biggest challenge right now, is that we're not finished. We can't be finished. And that we need new contributors to continue editing because we will never be finished, because there's always more things to add. There's always things to change. Just one short thing. Some of you might remember in the early days of Wikipedia, Nature ran this study comparing Wikipedia articles to Encyclopedia Britannica articles. And they found similar levels of accuracy, and everyone was amazed, right? How could this be possible? Um, so a few years later, I was working in a library at the University of California, Davis, and I was helping teach this class. And we decided to replicate the study. We decided to have our students read Britannica articles and Wikipedia articles on a topic of their choosing and see how they stacked up. And I will never forget this one student. He was from a small country. He was from a South Pacific island nation. And he said, look, I read these two articles about my country, and Britannica sounds like they were written by a colonizer. And Wikipedia is not perfect. There's a lot of things missing, but it sounds like it was written by people who care about the place. And that has stuck with me for this whole time, years and years, that to see yourself in the encyclopedia, to see yourself in the world's reference works, your culture, your place, your people, that's important, and that's what we're working towards.
Let me add something to Phoebe's point. We live in a moment when people doubt expertise and they doubt authority, and for very good reason. And what you all have proven with Wikipedia is that intelligence is distributed. It is not confined to a small number of faculty offices. It is widespread. And because of the careful vetting and procedures that you use, the articles are better than in encyclopedias created by quote unquote experts.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. And I think this leads into actually both of my next questions here. So I'll for the first one I've got for Carwell, which Carwell, you've edited Wikipedia yourself, as well as assigning your students at Vanderbilt to edit Wikipedia. How has Wikipedia challenged traditional ideas of authority in knowledge production, and what kinds of knowledge are only possible on a platform like Wikipedia?
So thanks. I'm What I really enjoy about teaching with Wikipedia is giving people that opportunity to switch from being readers to creators on Wikipedia. And that is just such a profound mental shift where we used to think of it as primarily the edit button, and now I feel like it's not as much of a surprise. There are more edit buttons on the internet, but there's still like that shift to authorship and that shift to being able to create is just a really powerful moment to get access to as a teacher, right? And and sometimes in a really flippant way where someone will be like, I see there's this tiny problem on your article, and I'm like, we're in a classroom, like, you're going to fix it, right? Like, we're all going to participate in that. But I mean, I think that the ways that Wikipedia is different from other sources and definitely from prior encyclopedias are a lot about um, uh, there are a number of different things. One is that they're globalized, right? Like that people from all around the world are actually contributing to these conversations. Um, and I also think that Wikipedia is now the standard encyclopedia that people are familiar with. And some of the conventions that it came up with, like the info box with its, if you go to Republic of South Africa, you can click down and see the name of that nation state in all 12 of its official languages, rather than seeing it kind of from the outside. Encyclopedias used to be this national project that looked at the rest of the world, often an imperial project. It's not, happenstance that the most prominent was Encyclopedia Britannica. Um, and and second, like Wikipedia is electronic, therefore it is current. It is surprisingly um, perhaps best produced in those areas where there's been just a lot of new and current information. I was looking at the Syrian Civil War article for examples of like the kinds of level of detail that are only imaginable on Wikipedia. And because of its role in the free culture ecosystem, right? And those things that are infinitely reproducible. And then the fact that if you contribute your thing to Wikipedia, you know that we'll get this much broader audience. There's some really amazing, like high quality mapping, some data visualization, some other things like that that are brought into places like that. I don't think that I've seen elsewhere, this degree of infographics, for example, on that page about, there's a local, regional, and international actors involved in the Syrian civil war that is a pretty comprehensive map that people have, made up over time. And I think that there are a number of articles that it would otherwise have been too daunting to generate and keep current the object in traditional scholarship. I think about the things that I've gone back to again and again. Like I contributed a lot to the marital rape article, right? This is a thing that progressively over the late 20th and early 21st century was criminalized in most but not all countries. And that like keeping an accurate map of that presented a lot of work, but also was only possible in a place where people could regularly update the thing, not as possible in a situation where it was like single individuals. Similar things on LGBT rights, right? And a huge amount of transition just during the existence of Wikipedia over the last 25 years. And yet you can have a map of what does that look like today, right? Where can queer people get married and not? Where is it prohibited and not on an ongoing basis? And so like that format of the table and the custom map is something that I think, Wikipedia didn't invent those, but like globalized them and made them routine and possible. And you think about the ways that Wikipedia has evolved, like co-evolved with some data sets and systems of knowledge maintenance and awareness. So if you look at a particular gene that has a significant uh, effect on human biology, and I suspect other forms of biology as well. There are often individual pages when I teach about skin color, melanin, and human evolution. I can give people like literally the info box in the side of my lecture slide, and then have them, they can look in more detail about what studies are out there, all these things. And if those genetic pages have these very long info boxes because 6 or 8 or 10 different sequence referencers and sort of genetic data set providers have authorities that are all now interlinked on Wikipedia, interlinked in the back frame on Wikidata, that's allowing a kind of concordance between different research approaches. And it's a chance for people to both share, and these are my experiences watching my students do this, right? Share the things that they're really passionate about, that otherwise would not be a part of the global story. And so watching students, produce articles on the Red Power movement in the US, on the one hand, and also for students to kind of share amongst each other, like the new intellectual trends in the discipline and what they care about, what does it mean, like I've come to make a part of my process, and I think they do too, of if you want to understand a field, presenting it in a way that is extremely fair, puts in all sides of the topic, so is broad, and attempts to, just not decide what your opinion is before you know what everyone else's opinion is. And then those are kind of the rules of Wikipedia, and they're just such functional rules for doing something. And then it lets other students pick up where you left off with all of the knowledge that you've accumulated over that one semester. And so, yeah, I just really value this kind of chain approach through which Wikipedia gets better.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, I know. I hear that echoed from a lot of the faculty who teach with Wikipedia, that sort of ability, especially in today's sort of fragmented media ecosystem, to truly understand different perspectives and not live in one bubble before you start forming your own opinion can be such an important skill for students to learn, and Wikipedia is such a great vehicle for that. Ryan, my next question is for you. You've approached Wikipedia in many ways. So, as you mentioned, somebody who edits yourself, someone who researches and writes on Wikipedia, someone who has run programs on Wikipedia. How has Wikipedia's relationship with expertise changed over time, and how has that affected its legitimacy?
Yeah, so the Wikipedia's relationship with expertise has been something that I've been interested in for some time, and the relationship is, well, it's complicated. That's the relationship status. There's the one sense of what experts think about it, and that's become a little less complicated. It's had a really fun trajectory of being treated with deep skepticism by experts. And I think anybody who's coming to a Wiki Education event understands the phenomenon of professors telling students just don't use it, and then the importance of getting over that too, because it's something that students tend to use anyway, and introducing it as more of a subject for information literacy and something where you can affect change. And especially in the whatever we want to call it, the stuff that happened in the late 2010s, where we came up with terms like fake news and alternative facts, Wikipedia really emerged as not this silly, quirky place for a bunch of nerds that is the bane of every teacher's existence, but actually like the savior of the internet and facts in the world. It's a little too much, but so Wikipedia has become something that experts like. There's the relationship between Wikipedia and experts as writers of Wikipedia, which I think in the very earliest days might have been kind of fun because it's just about like write what you know. But over time, as the standards have evolved and gotten quite strict, it got more complicated. And the role of expertise shifted on Wikipedia from just write what you know to becoming an expert in the selection and summary of the best possible sources. And that varies quite a bit by field. There's some subjects that are in the news that you might not need that kind of expertise for. Meanwhile, a subject like, say medicine, really benefits from having expert editors evaluating the sources, which can be quite complex. So the other dimension of the relationship between expertise and Wikipedia would be the relationship between Wikipedia and external expertise. And that's just really kind of what I just said, is the relationship between Wikipedia and the sources that it cites. And over time, the standards for, wouldn't call it expertise, but reliability of those sources has gotten really strict. And again, it kind of varies a little bit by subject area, but the standard for sourcing has gradually tightened. And I think that happened around the same time that Wikipedia started being talked about as the savior of facts in the world. Is that wasn't lost on the volunteers who write it. There are a lot of volunteers who said, maybe we should actually be a little harder on people who add misinformation. Maybe we should not use all these sources that are kind of borderline. Maybe we should kind of increase the standards a little bit. People are actually relying on us. We're kind of at the center of the information ecosystem right now on the internet. And so the reaction to that is kind of increasing standards, which at the same time kind of made it harder for people to contribute. And then the other kind of dimension of this is the rise of expertise about Wikipedia on Wikipedia. And so on Wikipedia, there are lots of rules. And there's a big learning curve for those rules. And we like to say, ignore the rules, just try to add what you can, summarize some sources. But there's a dimension of experts on wiki policy that it's been kind of complicated. There's been a lot of criticism of Wikipedia for being so heavily rule-based and for having this steep learning curve. And maybe some people who don't explain the rules all that well to newcomers. And so there's a kind of a competing expertise that it's not new. It's kind of like been a joke about Wikipedia for a while, is the expert comes on Wikipedia, they misplace some punctuation along with their giant paragraph that improves the article, and somebody comes along and undoes it because it doesn't meet the manual of style or something like that. So there's like a kind of a different dimension of expertise. But then externally, there's also this kind of anti-expertise pressure being applied, attacking Wikipedia for its reliance on expert sources and the way that it identifies reliable sources in a way that doesn't like defer to public opinion or what powerful people want to say. And so, yeah, the last part of what you asked was, how does this affect its legitimacy? I'd say that if a good faith attempt to understand Wikipedia's legitimacy, that's just the wrong way of looking at its legitimacy, is through the lens of expertise. The Wikipedia's legitimacy comes from a combination of its process and the intentions of its volunteers who are there to support the process. It's through, as much as I complain about the rules of Wikipedia and the standards of Wikipedia, it's by a large group of people believing that this is the way to do it, and by following these standards. And so it's really belief in the process, because at the end of the day, those editors are not writing anything novel that doesn't exist in the world already. So it's almost like surprising that Wikipedia has been such a butt of criticism lately, because it's a tertiary source. It only summarizes what already exists. But it's not surprising because it's a powerful source. And getting at something real quick that both Carl and Phoebe mentioned, encyclopedias have a long, long tradition of being closely tied to power. And it goes all the way back to the first encyclopedia that we still have a record of, Pliny the Elder. His natural history in the first century Rome was effectively a work of apology for Roman expansion. The Roman Empire benefited from it. Pliny was friends with the emperors. He taught them, and then at every step from there until the past couple of hundred years, there's been tight state or church control over the production of encyclopedias. Then there was the involvement of money, and Wikipedia is really just kind of the outlier, because Wikipedia is the first time that you haven't had to actually get someone's permission in order to write an encyclopedia. And so that's really the unsurprising place of where all the criticism of Wikipedia has come to, is not about its relationship with expertise. And so apologies for the tangent, but it's about the fact that Wikipedia does not have to ask anyone's permission. And so those who want to ask permission have turned instead to criticizing it.
Thanks, Ryan. And I think that actually leads directly into my next question, which is for Steve. So, Steve, you have been an expert on higher education and knowledge production for decades, including writing a well-regarded column first for Inside Higher Ed and now on Substack. And this fall, you wrote a great piece on what you call the Wikipedia paradox. And you point out how universities can learn something from Wikipedia's system where trust is earned through procedure and not prestige. From your perspective, how has Wikipedia earned that trust, and how can that be extended to other knowledge institutions such as higher education?
I'm a historian. I'm from the world of credentialed expertise. And what has that brought us? It has brought us distrust from the public. It has brought us a replicability crisis where many of the most famous experiments have been debunked. This is a problem for us. Uh, and so I'm a historian, and it's striking to me that the greatest reference book ever put together before Wikipedia, which is the Oxford English Dictionary, was created just like Wikipedia. That is, ordinary people contribute, teachers, shopkeepers, widows, and the like. And the most prolific contributor was a convicted murderer in an asylum. This was not created by credentialed expertise. It was created by a process. First of all, that process rested upon distributed intelligence, that there is lots of expertise around. Much of that expertise is local, but if you combine it, you have great expertise. Secondly, you have a strong editorial framework. It's not everything goes, it's constant vetting and evaluation. Third, it's norms, obedience to norms rather than credentials. We all know what those norms are for Wikipedia. It's balance. It's about sourcing. It's about reliability. Then there's iterative improvement. Every article gets better over time through a process of collective vetting. And then, perhaps most important of all, there's the moral commitment of the volunteers who work on this project. They are committed to its success. Now, I'm afraid my world, higher education, is nothing like that. It values prestige. It values credentials. It values prizes and awards. And all that has gotten us is distrust from the public, a conviction that we are more committed to self-branding or to our own personal politics than we are to shared knowledge. Wikipedia is the great utopian project of our time. It is what the internet was supposed to be, not commodified knowledge for sale, but bringing the world together to pool all of our knowledge. And nothing illustrates that better, I think, than AI, which relies heavily on Wikipedia more than any other source, precisely because it is more reliable because of procedure rather than prestige.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that the transparent nature of Wikipedia enables everyone to sort of see that history and see how that knowledge is created in a way that is revolutionary and has gotten Wikipedia to where we are today. So my next question is for anyone. So I'll just sort of throw it out there and feel free to jump in here. And I think some of you have touched on this already, but how does Wikipedia's open model shape whose knowledge is visible and whose is missing, and why is that important?
So I'm going to jump in and say, the good part is that the doors are open, right? That anyone can walk in. It is not even a like hugely bandwidth intensive thing. Increasingly, like it is possible to contribute even on mobile. There's a lot of and the multilingual aspect, right? Is very substantial. There are still many people who linguistically could only contribute to a very sort of young and undeveloped Wikipedia, and many people for whom there's not yet one. But those things aside, like those doors are open and substantial. And then the flip side is that, internet resources, and then especially like high quality, reliable sources are filtered through a global scientific publishing industry that is and scholarly publishing industry that is highly concentrated, in which mutual knowledge amongst all languages isn't nowhere near parity. There are some a few very central nodes in that process, and where there's just a huge imbalance in terms of what is the amount of direct publishing and what is the relative status and awareness of different national presses. So there's a bunch of work that is left to be done on that. But I also think yeah, it's just a kind of interesting global sphere where figuring out how exactly do you get basic knowledge about to be equitable in a fundamental way is just a continuing challenge. I think that Wikipedia standards have become the lightning rod in those conversations, but often it's a question of no, how do we actually document? How do we make sure that that stuff gets into print elsewhere so that Wikipedia can talk about it? Um, and how do we treat it when it's out there? I've been wanting for years for us to do, sort of treat all mythologies with the same level of detail that we treat, Western or like large country pop culture things. Like do um, uh, may or may not be fiction, but definitely are things that we could plot summarize, and it would just fundamentally open up a whole new arena of Wikipedia. But I do think that Wikipedia is different and has a lot of advantages over other redistributors and central sources on content.
We live in a society in which much knowledge is gated, and it's written by experts who are not especially accessible to the public. And that combination is really terrible. And so we need other kind of people who can offer synthesis, who can offer critique, who can offer alternate perspectives, but in a disciplined manner. And that's what Wikipedia allows. Uh, it is to me a horrible reality that proprietary journals publish scholarship and don't make it available to the public. Much of that research, of course, is funded by the public. Knowledge deserves to be free, as we long said, and Wikipedia is one of the few venues that makes that possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in and say, Stephen, to that point, I'm a librarian in my day job, so I think about sources constantly. That's what I do. And Wikipedia has been one of the best arguments for making things open access. And by things, I mean sort of traditional sources like journals and articles and published peer-reviewed work. Open access so that Wikipedia editors who very often aren't in the academy can read them and use them as sources in this like larger red thing, Wikipedia. So I think that's been one, really lovely follow-on effect that I wasn't, expecting in 2003. The other thing I would say about sources is Wikipedia is imperfect. It's certainly not finished, and there are many big systemic gaps, and very often those do reflect kind of gaps in the larger publishing world. You know, many kinds of things have not been well documented, like to your point, Carwell, like have not been published about, have not been written about, have not been, formal scholarship. And that's a hard dilemma that we find ourselves with on Wikipedia, right? Like how to represent those topics if there's not sources. Um, at the same time, though, in this particular current moment, I'm in the US, and there's a lot of drama about what information looks like in our news and media ecosystem right now. Um, I feel like Wikipedia is in many ways very kind of old-fashioned and holding the line about like there is such a thing as a reputable source because there are processes that create reputable sources. There are journalistic ethics. There is peer review. There are all these things. And so the flip side is like, yes, there is a world in which there are reputable sources that we can draw from and synthesize to make this encyclopedia. So it's a very complicated balance when you're talking about sources.
Thanks, all. Yeah, I think the sort of looking back of what have we done of the last 25 years, there's been a lot of successes and there's been a lot of challenges. And um, I think I want to transition us into the sort of future. And we touched on AI a little bit earlier, but what does Wikipedia's story tell us about the future of knowledge more broadly, and especially in today's AI and video-driven world?
When the Oxford English Dictionary was created, they did not have to worry about bad faith actors. They did not have to worry about organized ideologies that are being spread. They did not have to worry about AI generated nonsense. They didn't have to worry about organized misinformation. And you are faced with all of that. This is really a challenge. And you've been able to hold the line because your volunteers are strongly committed to certain norms about knowledge. And those norms are under assault right now. And they're not simply undermined by information terrorists, lone individuals, but by organized efforts to reframe what knowledge is, what quote unquote reality is. And they understand that Wikipedia is one of the obstacles in their way, right? An independent, validated source of information where people can trust it. And in this world, you have to keep that up. Because if you don't, I don't know who will.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. So in a way, I think that the question of how we understand Wikipedia, how we generalize from that to a historical trend or to the future or to some large domain has been really difficult because Wikipedia is fundamentally the exception. And when it first came out, and especially among the hype of Web 2.0 in like 2005 to 2008, books were written about how Wikipedia was this, utopian idea that was going to revolutionize the world. It was going to be the model for all sorts of other things. And it just didn't happen. Like there were a few other of these like peer production projects, but for the most part, Wikipedia has been singular. The rest of the internet has become far from utopia. It's become consolidated. It's been enshittified, if I may. It's become abstracted from reality and reflecting more like the logics of attention and platform capitalism. But Wikipedia has continued, and so it's the exception. So it's hard to generalize from it because Wikipedia is not a model. It's not a sign of things to come. It's lightning in a bottle, and that's why, similar to what Stephen said, it's so important that it sticks around. That is the most important thing. Some of the way it sticks around could be continuing to do what it's doing. I would encourage people to read Josh Dzieza's long form article in The Verge a few months ago about how Wikipedia persists because it's boring mainly. And if it stays boring, then that's a good sign for Wikipedia. But there may be things like, getting more into video. Wikipedia is really, really, really bad at video. Getting into the reasons why is too much of a tangent. But like even by Microsoft and Encarta standards, Wikipedia is bad at video. There are, in terms of AI, there are good and bad things as far as Wikipedia on AI. To me, a lot of people are concerned, as am I, about the abstraction of labor that goes into Wikipedia being taken away by it's being ingested into chatbots. And when somebody asks a chatbot a question, they may be getting information from Wikipedia in a way that doesn't credit Wikipedia, and that stands to alienate people. There's a great paper by Matt Vetter and Zach McDowell about this some months ago, the alienation of the commons. I tend to think that any way that Wikipedia, the knowledge of Wikipedia influences the knowledge of people means that we're succeeding, even if we don't wind up getting credit. ChatGPT reaches a whole lot of people that don't like Wikipedia these days, especially. And if Wikipedia's information can get to people through ChatGPT, almost like laundering the reputation, I don't know. I don't think that that's such a bad thing. But yeah, so I'd say it's more that the way Wikipedia is treated or discussed is what we need to look at when thinking about the future of knowledge, and not what Wikipedia itself has been doing. Yeah, I think that has more implications.
Thanks, Ryan. And oh, Carl, were you going to
I'm
jump in
gonna
here?
offer contrarian hope on this panel, which is I'm not a position I'm totally used to, and probably not talk much about AI in doing so. But I think of Wikipedia as an open project, as actually like this is a spreading viral presence that I think is present in a number. Like I, I've shifted over the last like 5 or 8 years from doing predominantly like individual ethnographic work to doing digital humanities work, and increasingly like data visualization work. I do that, working in a programming language R that's basically like a big collective product that is constantly being added to by community members, has multiple levels of community sitting above it, with people who are very enthusiastic about making the data that they produce available freely, with multiple platforms, weirdly enough, like GitHub has been formally incorporated into Microsoft, but is fundamentally just a like giant data sharing and software sharing platform, of which there are multiple open competitors, and is very easy to write a script to move from one to the other. I think that the open web is substantial. In just on the web, but like in knowledge production is huge, and is like increasingly made normalized by very much attacked but resilient institutions like the NIH and the NSF, that are insisting that scientists ought to do that. And I actually got a shove in my like individual academic career from a grant provider and in the NSF saying, no, 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 what we're really excited about is the open aspect of what you're doing. I think that there's increasingly a standard for academics to both want to and in practice share their academic output as part of things. I think there's also a de facto like gray market of all academic matter that means that in practice, academics are just accessing PDFs even if they are not supposed to. So like there's a pretty broad sector that's there. And what's weird to me is that both of those have that same energy. And in some ways, like the open data and our community has this, and reproducible research community, which has been given this enormous boost by the need, by the what's it called, reproducibility crisis, right? So that is now increasingly like seen as the right thing to do from a knowledge perspective. Anyway, those people are super excited and super into the work that they do, and they're always giving stuff away, and they're always making workshops, and they feel like early Wikipedia community. What I think is missing is there aren't as many bridges between those people who are giving data away free and those people who are kind of summarizing knowledge on Wikimedia institutions. And I'm optimistic of our ability to, really generate more of those bridges and brings more of that energy into revitalizing Wikipedia. So I don't think we're like the lone outpost. I think we actually have a ton of friends that we could get a lot of new energy from.
Thanks. I want to transition us now to the questions that have been coming in from the chat. And I know I think Phoebe's in there answering a few of them, but I'm going to ask one of them live here, which is many first-year college students that I work with tell me that they have never even looked at a Wikipedia article because they have been told repeatedly throughout their K through 12 experience that they should never use it. How can we help Gen Z and Alpha see their agency in using and creating information on this powerful free knowledge platform?
I
Phoebe.
can I can start in on this one because the questioner and the comments that just came in the chat. So one thing I do is I teach information literacy sessions in other people's classes. So I go to lots of classes every year and do a single session. And um I for the first years especially, everyone raises their hand. Were you told not to use Wikipedia in middle school? Everyone raises their hand. Were you told not to use Wikipedia in elementary school? And everyone raises their hand. And I think about, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary. That means that this project has been around longer than these folks have been alive, if they're traditionally aged college students. Longer than they've been alive, certainly for their entire research and reading and writing history. Um, and it's not just that they don't use it. I think that it's just like air. Like it's always been there. It will always be there. It's like Google. It's like, I don't know, sort of exists as part of the internet. One thing that I worry about a lot is that Wikipedia depends on people seeing it. It depends on people reading it. And I think that we do have a whole generation of folks who have never maybe even gone to the internet and done a Google search in the way that those of us who came up in the early days of the internet would. Maybe they've used apps, maybe they've used other platforms. Maybe haven't looked at Wikipedia directly. Certainly haven't thought about editing it, right? And so, um, yeah, we all need to reframe our ideas of what students use as their go-to sources, I think.
It's an interesting question why teachers don't trust Wikipedia because we have 25 years of research that reinforces the idea that it is as trustworthy as any other uh, encyclopedia created by credentialed authorities. And the reason I think that there's the distrust is because you can learn independently of the classroom, that you don't have to rely on the educational institutions, and it encourages the kind of self-education that used to be an ideal. I see this very much as turf war about controlling expertise, of controlling access to knowledge. And that's something that needs to be pushed back against, because that's the mentality that has commodified research in our society. It is the mentality that has commodified and isolated authority in the society. Instead of engaging in dialogue with people, we've set up a walled garden for ourselves, protected against the masses who could get expertise elsewhere.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions coming in on the chat here, and I don't think we'll have time to answer them all. But I'll ask one and then move on to our final question here. The question says, "Do you have any specific ideas for how we can fight this newfound sense of existential fear about the future of Wikipedia? Is increasing contributions enough?"
Every pressure in our society is to make money from anything, but especially from knowledge and information. So Wikipedia is an existential threat to that model. And if it's not defended, if it's not well supported, it could be put out of business by lawsuits. One could see that happening. Uh, Accusations of inaccuracy and bias, and judges who do not recognize its model of radical transparency as being adequate. One could imagine a Wikipedia article, since there's 7 million of them in English, that contains bad advice. This is a real threat. And so I think it is essential to reaffirm the values that underlie Wikipedia: a neutral point of view, verifiability of information, citations to reliable sources, transparency over disputes, and a culture of correction. None of the things which exist in established scholarship.
I have been involved in Wikimedia governance in one way or another for a long time, and um, I wouldn't say this is a newfound fear about the future of Wikipedia. I think we've been thinking and worried about the future of Wikipedia for a long time, just in general, because it seems so unlikely that this project could A, work in the first place, and B, continue. But here we are, 25 years on. So, congratulations to all of us. But it, I worry about a slightly larger frame. Things like the collapse of journalism due to, monetary and financialization pressures. If there's no good local journalism, there's no good sources for Wikipedia to cite about those local topics that might have otherwise been covered, right? And so things like that, I think, pose like this kind of bigger threat to the whole information ecosystem. In academic publishing, of course, we have a lot of experts in academic publishing on the call here, but there's again pressures about money and consolidation. And so that's what I worry about along with Wikipedia is kind of the whole shooting match, which is bigger than us. But important to making sure that the project can continue.
I would just add one thing that I think that ultimately, yeah, these bigger systemic issues like the coordinated movement to erode trust in traditional knowledge institutions and whatnot, that's the big deal. Specific to Wikipedia, one thing that I think doesn't get enough attention is the need not just for more volunteer writers, but also the need for more advocates. Like they're among the fiercest Wikipedia critics, I can think of entire news channels and probably a dozen people who regularly speak about Wikipedia for a particular audience that is critical. And I try to think of how many people I can identify that speak on behalf of Wikipedia on a regular basis. And I think of Jimmy Wales, who has done a good job as the, once benevolent dictator and then kind of public face of Wikipedia. And I think, the other one that comes to mind, I saw in the chat, Annie Rowerda, another great ambassador for Wikipedia. There aren't that many more. Like there are people who write one-off stories. There are a few great journalists who make it kind of their beat. Stephen Harrison comes to mind, who does good journalism work regularly, but there aren't people who regularly speak about Wikipedia to advocate for it, to highlight how it works, to explain the people who sit behind the screens and do this volunteer labor and provide a counter. So yeah, if anybody is looking for a journalism beat or an academic beat or just a punditry, pro Wikipedia punditry, let's get that in there.
All right, we're almost at time, so I want to close with one quick round question here and just give the first thing that comes to your mind and keep it short since we're at time. What's one thing about Wikipedia today that makes you hopeful for the future?
Wikipedia is the model for a better world, a collective world that is not totally commodified and commercialized.
Every time I go to the site, 20 plus years on, I discover something new. A new project, a new editor, uh, Ryan's dinosaur project, you know, there's always something. There's always something new to find.
The Discord server, there's an unofficial Wikipedia Discord server, and just see a huge number of largely quite young Wikipedians being really enthusiastic and socializing on the basis of Wikipedia. It gives me some hope.
It is just a fun place to engage and create. And I think that there's a lot of growing tools to like keep it ahead of the curve and make it stay the good place for people or best place for people to get information on new topics.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you in the audience who are college or university instructors here in the United States and Canada, if this panel has inspired you to want to assign your students to edit Wikipedia, visit teach.wikiedu.org. If you have been inspired to join the community of contributors yourself and want to take one of our courses, please visit learn.wikiedu.org. And please join us for our next speaker series, which will be coming up next month. We're still finalizing the date, but it will be a panel of student editors who have participated in the Wikipedia student program. And so if you're interested in hearing the perspectives of students who are assigned to edit Wikipedia as a course assignment, I encourage you, you will receive an email after the session with more information about that. But please join me in thanking our four wonderful panelists. This has been a really great and thoughtful discussion today. And I hope you all are inspired to go read, edit, and otherwise join the community of wonderful Wikipedians if you are not already part of us. Thank you so much.